On to Paul Gervais with Alberta Ag, and he has done some work on successful SuperNet applications. Paul is joining us up at the Edmonton location as well, and I see he's just getting set up. Thanks for joining us, Paul.
Oh, can everyone see the PowerPoint up on the screen?
Yeah.
Great. Well, thank you again. What I'd like to talk about a little bit is a project that we did out of our shop this last summer. I'm with Alberta Agriculture and Rural Development. Specifically, I'm in the Rural Development Division. And what we are very interested in is ubiquitous broadband across Alberta and the applications that communities and people are using broadband for. What kind of things are they doing? And more specifically, for those who aren't engaged in broadband, the communities that aren't using broadband, the people that aren't using broadband, or don't have a sense of what it is, what are the gaps? What are the kind of things that we could help to do to help encourage people to take on broadband projects, broadband activities? Yes, we recognize last mile, first mile is an issue, and that technology is, it's never perfectly simple or perfectly easy to do. So there are issues out there. So this presentation I have here was compiled by myself and Catherine Staring Parrish, and Catherine was our external consultant on this particular project. So first of all, let's see, I'll make this go. Okay, so the background to our project. Well, we know that high-speed broadband enables a lot of good things. It enables things like this video conference that we're doing right now across Alberta. And it allows us to do all those things that we heard about earlier this morning. So we went out and said, well, what kind of things are rural residents, rural businesses, rural communities doing that are good examples of things that we could take and say, here's what they're doing. Why are those things not happening in other places? And what can we do to help use those as examples of good things that are happening? So some Alberta communities have embraced broadband and some have not yet. And why? So what did we want to do? We want to explore some of the existing culture of broadband use, talk about the culture of use, and we want to do this to advance Alberta government's interest in supporting and enhancing the rural information society. Because as Sandra just mentioned, this is becoming rapidly a utility. It's rapidly becoming very important to have this at our fingertips. Okay. So to do this, we set up a couple different things. We wanted to have a picture or a bit of a map of what the province looks like in terms of where projects are taking place, what kind of things are happening. We wanted to then go and look at a few selected cases and say what's going on in these particular communities, these particular businesses, these particular educational institutions. What are they doing that would be good examples of things that we could talk to other people about? And then we're going to use that to inform future extension opportunities. To look around and say, what can we do that take these best practices and help to move towards that culture of use in places that aren't engaged in a culture of use. This project, I should mention, we had a steering committee. Steering committee was made up of Dr. Marco Adria and Dr. John Parkins, both of the University of Alberta, and Robert Hornbrook, who's sitting there in the audience. Wave, Robert. There you are. And what Marco and John were able to do was bring a fairly rigorous perspective to how would you structure a research project like this so that the results would be useful, and more importantly, how to ask the questions that we needed to ask to get to where we wanted to go. One of the things we wanted to do was also look at the scope of the project in terms of what do we want to cover. Wanted to look at selected rural communities, selected projects, selected things that were happening that demonstrated innovative use of broadband. We didn't want to look at government-to-government activities specifically because that's already covered in other places. How did we do this? Well, we brought on Catherine, our external consultant, and we also hired a summer student from the University of Alberta who spent her time most of the summer on the phone, on the computer, doing email, contacting individuals, contacting communities, doing those kind of things. And I should point out, this was a qualitative analysis. It's not a number crunching quantitative work. So we wanted to find out the qualitative issues. What were they? So we started by talking to a number of communities. A number of them are actually hooked up today, and talking to people out there. And that expanded to, what other kind of projects and things that are happening in the province. And there's quite a few. Altogether, there's well over 200 things that were potential things that we could include in our project. We didn't want that many. We wanted to focus on a dozen at the most. So in terms of emerging themes, the results of what we had was we're looking at issues that came out, and obviously access in the community is a big one. How are people getting access? Are they accessing through their own systems at home in their business? Are they plugging into going to the local library and using a video conference facility there, or something through the educational institution? But what it's really telling us is that there's new roles coming out, new cooperative and partnership roles coming out between communities and libraries and schools and the facilities that they have that other people can use. And that's golden opportunities for partnerships, for collaboration, for spreading the word on what can be done. Other things that were happening out there was, we said, what are people using this for besides the other things that we've seen like this morning? And one of the strong messages that came back was training in things that, in training programs, in some of those life skill things, in some of those professional development things that we don't often see or talk about. Instead of a professional having to travel to Calgary or to Red Deer or to Edmonton to take a professional development course, they're much, much easier now to do this over the internet. Still not everywhere, but it's possible. Multi-purpose video conferencing, like some of the medical technologies we saw this morning, that's phenomenal. So we're starting to see more of that. And we're really, as we pointed out earlier this morning with education, was this access to online education, to be able to plug into Drumheller, to be able to plug in to other places like the Smithsonian and some of the things that were happening there last summer. Okay, what else? Well, challenges and infrastructure was always an issue there. First mile, last mile. The people who aren't connected right now aren't connected for some reasons. There's a rural digital divide. And what is the rural digital divide? It could be simply there isn't broadband where they are. Or it could be there is broadband, but it's very expensive. Or there is broadband, but it's not very good. So, those are some of the issues we came across. Funding, of course, there's always a funding story. IT support, well, we've had our capable IT guy working diligently in the back to keep this conference running here. And in a lot of small places, a lot of communities, a lot of rural places, there isn't necessarily that IT support. So what are ways to do that? Do you bring people on board? Do you train them? Do you make them, do you grow your own, or do you bring them in? But the other part of it is the whole diffusion of innovation. When an innovation starts somewhere in a community here or a business over there, how do those successful things come out? And diffusion of innovation takes time and takes practice. It's all about looking at what is successful in certain places and people becoming aware of that and saying, how can we use that here? Would that make a difference to us? When Sandra talked about the farmer who can take apart his tractor into 1,200 pieces and put it back together, but doesn't want a computer, well, that's an issue. There's a divide there as well. And it's a cultural divide. It's a culture of use divide. So as part of our research results, we're looking at various things that came out of this. Some of it was how do you overcome that culture of use? And I think part of it is a lot of it to do with diffusion of innovation, the time and the patience where people can see the next generation of people coming along who are growing up with this technology, who assume the benefits are there. One of the things that really seems to come out, especially with conferences like this, is the whole notion of telepresence. And telepresence, where I can be here, I can also be in Red Deer, I can be in small communities around Alberta, just by standing in front of a camera and having a good internet video conferencing system. And that can work for all of you here as well. Something that's interesting too, is in terms of saying, what else can we do with this? Where can we go with it? And we're looking at extension opportunities. We're looking at opportunities where we can do things to help bridge that digital divide, to encourage a culture of use, a culture of broadband use in the province. I have a quote here from Everett Rogers. Diffusion is the process in which an innovation is communicated through certain channels, and they could be social channels, business channels, other channels, educational channels, over time among members of a social system. So diffusion of innovation. So time helps. There's other research around, and you probably picked up one of these outside, at least at our site. We have this Harnessing the SuperNet Advantage. That's a piece that was put together by Venture Magazine for Axia a couple years ago. And so they talk about different applications. And there's lots of academic research out there. People are interested in saying what kind of